Hello, I am Michael Collins and welcome to Media Focus. So, today we are going to be discussing binary oppositions and structuralist theory. So, we're going to be broadly talking about this within the context of the music video industry, but binary oppositions are a theory which can be applied to any media industry. It is an absolutely essential theory. So just first of all, just considering the textual analysis toolkit and the kind of media language that you are going to be using for the music industry, although this is essentially applied to many other different industries. We can see in media studies there's a big focus on things like codes and conventions, on performance narrative and structure, and things like this. And there's certain concepts that you are going to be using time and time again. But essentially, what A-level media studies boils down to, at its most simple level, is how do media products create meaning for their audience? And I think this is something which is absolutely essential to keep in your mind as you're doing the subject, because even though it might seem to be extremely complicated sometimes, at its heart, it is very, very straightforward. You are taking things and you're using media language and sophisticated media language in order to communicate the fact that you know how meaning is created for the audience. So a lot of these concepts are pretty hardcore. Things like intertextuality, things like postmodernism and hegemony and stuff like that can be pretty full on. But luckily, binary oppositions are very, very straightforward, and it's something that you will have encountered in your everyday life, throughout your life. So, texture analysis. Why is it essential? Well, basically because you are getting marks for it. So, again, thinking about the music industry and thinking about the music videos that you're studying, well, you're going to be getting marks for textually analyzing them. You're going to be getting marks for pointing out things like shot types, like camera angles, like editing, like mise en scène. And if you're not using those words in the exam, then basically you are not getting marks. So, this is something which is really, really important, and it's definitely something to consider throughout. You've also got to make explicit reference to a range of media theory. And although theory might seem scary, sometimes there are certain theories which are much more straightforward than other media theories. So today we're going to be looking at binary oppositions, which quite frankly is a straightforward media theory to apply to a range of different media topics. So first of all, what are binary oppositions? Well, binary oppositions come under the framework of structuralism. And at its broadest level, structuralism is all about the underlying meanings in signs and symbols. It is very, very closely related to language and how we use language and how we use language to perceive the world around this. So it comes from this idea that language constructs the world around us. And when we use words and when we consider what words to use, this essentially creates a world around us. So if we think about a concept like a fridge, for example, when I say that word, it has many underlying connotations. When I say the word fridge, you might think big fridge. You might think that it's cold as well. If I were to say a broken fridge, then obviously this is going to have various different concepts. So obviously this is fairly basic stuff, right? And kind of taking this idea maybe just a little bit further, we have the semiotician Claude Levi-Strauss, who was really, really interested in myths, and he was really, really interested in stories, and he conducted quite significant research into how people use stories and how stories are structured, and what they tell, what they say about us, and what they say about our society. And one of the most key concepts in Levi Strauss's oeuvre is this notion of binary oppositions and this idea that we all make sense of the world through binary oppositions. So, in a nutshell, binary oppositions are this idea that we understand the world not through what something is, but through what something is not. And this is really, really fundamental. So just have a quick think about this because, this is something you've been doing your whole life, but actually we just need to look at a couple of examples. So first of all, look out the window. And I guess this only works if it is the day, but you look out the window and you see that it's daylight. How do you know it's daylight? Well, you might say because it's bright, because the sun's out. But actually, a lot of days are very dark. Let's just say it's completely overcast and you can't see the sun. So these aren't ways of actually telling if it's day or not. Maybe there is a total eclipse. Maybe, there could be a whole range of reasons why it might be dark. So how do you know it's day? The answer is because it is not night. And if we didn't have this concept of night, if we didn't have day and night, if we didn't have the Earth orbiting the sun, and if we didn't have the Earth rotating on its axis, we wouldn't have a word for day and we wouldn't have a word for night. We just wouldn't have these concepts at all. If we think about the TV sitcom, animated sitcom The Simpsons, we know that Bart Simpson is really naughty. He's always getting up to scrapes. He's always doing awful things. But how do we know that he's really naughty? Well, the creators of The Simpsons have thoughtfully placed another character alongside him, Lisa Simpson, who is his binary opposite. She is completely different to him. Now, if every character in The Simpsons was just like Bart, then we wouldn't really think that he was particularly naughty. He would just be normal. But if we compare him to Lisa Simpson, his sister, who is a proper goody-goody, then suddenly he seems really naughty. And a lot of comedy comes from binary oppositions. The 1960 Alfred Hitchcock film Psycho is, well, at least half of it is set in an isolated motel out in the middle of nowhere. How do we know it's isolated? How do we know it's completely cut off? Well, the first scenes of Psycho are set in San Francisco, in a big city. And if we just had the entire film set in this isolated motel, it would not seem anywhere near as isolated. But because we see the main character, I think her name's Marion Crane, because we see her at work early on and we see her doing her normal life and we see her hanging around with other people, it seems so much more isolated when we actually get to the motel. And thinking again about slasher films, let's think about films like Halloween. We've got a scene, and suddenly the killer jumps out of a cupboard, and it's very, very loud indeed. And the girl he's trying to attack starts screaming. How do we know it's loud? Well, that's a silly question, because obviously we know when things are loud. But actually, the reason why we know it's loud is because it's not quiet. And if we think about the build-up to these action scenes, to these jump scares, the reason why they work so well is that generally in a good slasher film anyway, we'll have a long period of quiet which builds up to the jump scare and then makes it very, very scary when the killer does finally jump out. So these are all fairly straightforward examples of binary opposition. So we have day and night. We have Bart and Lisa. We have the crowded city and the isolated motel. And we also have things like loud and quiet. We could come up with many, many more examples of binary oppositions because they apply to every single last aspect of media studies. If you are writing a song and if you want the drop to be especially dramatic, then essentially make sure that there's some build-up, that you cut out the drums just right before there's a bass drop or something like that. And, this is really, really powerful. If you suddenly have a film, and then suddenly everything goes very, very light after it's been dark for a long time, everyone in the cinema starts to rub their eyes. And this is a very powerful and straightforward binary opposition. So this idea of binary oppositions basically indicates that we construct our entire world from the idea that two things are in conflict with one another. Often this is done for comedy. So, for example, in Friends, we have the character Joey. He is very sexually promiscuous. He is very stupid. He doesn't really know what's going on. And to be honest, he wouldn't be very funny if every character in Friends was like Joey. But then we have Chandler, who is his binary opposite. Chandler doesn't have much luck with women, and Chandler is also very nervous as well, unlike the confident Joey. And Chandler is also quite smart, just like Ross. And a lot of the comedy in Friends kind of comes from the Joey and Chandler binary opposition, these opposites attracting. And these ideas go, I mean, like, if you think about pretty much any sitcoms, we got The Big Bang Theory, we have Sheldon and Penny. If you think about Frasier, we have Frasier and Frasier's dad. If you think about, okay, I can't think about it anymore, but okay, so there's, many, many, many hundreds of examples of sitcoms which use binary oppositions. The Breakfast Club is another excellent example of chucking 6 very different people into a room and then seeing what happens. So we've got the weird girl and we've got the cool girl. We've got the tough guy, we've got the nerd. And a lot of the comedy, but also a lot of the drama in The Breakfast Club, the 1986 John Hughes film, comes from these different characters rubbing up against each other. Then we have the James Cameron film The Terminator, where we have a really not very sophisticated but really effective binary opposition between the metal, evil, relentless, inhuman Terminator, played by Arnold Schwarzenegger, and Sarah Connor, who he is chasing, who is a young, small woman who is much more human and is much more scared and actually shows emotions as well. So we have this really powerful binary opposition between the two of them. And in the Disney Pixar film Inside Out, we have a range of different emotions who are living in a girl's head. And again, a lot of the comedy, but also a lot of the drama comes from the fact that these different emotions conflict with each other. So why do producers use binary oppositions? So let's just take a couple of minutes just to think about this. Well, one, they work. They can make us laugh, they can upset us, and yeah, so it can get across an idea very quickly. A second reason is that you can encode quite complex things within a media product with very little effort if you use binary oppositions. If we have, for example, in Top Boy, we have this binary opposition between some of the drug dealers. So there's the drug dealers on the estate, and then there is the Northern Irish woman who seems to be living a very luxurious life. Well, this really does reinforce exactly how poor and rough and run down the drug dealers on the estate are, which really emphasizes the situation that they are in. So Top Boy will occasionally cut to a luxurious location just to emphasize exactly how run down and poverty stricken the estate where most of the drug dealing goes on is. And this can also communicate the ideology of the producer in a really effective way. Binary oppositions are also exciting. They can liven up a product. So if you're getting bored by something, the easiest way to mix things up is then to have a completely different scene. And this can really, really mix things up for the producer. So these are just a few reasons why producers use binary oppositions. So yeah, just go over these again. So first of all, they make things easy for the audience. If you're ever watching a teen film, so something like, I don't know, American Pie or whatever, we instantly know who the nerd is supposed to be. Like right at the start of the film, the nerd will be going through the corridor. They do this in Stranger Things as well. All the cheerleaders will laugh at the nerds. All the jocks will come along and say nerds and then chuck the nerd in the cupboard. And this emphasizes that, we've got this very specific character type and they are different from other people. It's funny for the audience. So think about, even going way, way back. So think about very early comedy like Laurel and Hardy. One's tall and thin, one is short and fat. So, there is comedy there by two mismatched characters who are shoved together. Binary oppositions make things very easy for the producer, so it's a big shortcut for the producer. The producer can use this to just essentially to spend more time driving the narrative forward. So essentially thinking about something like American Pie, we have the nerdy kids, we have the sex maniac, we have I can't remember, but there's probably other characters in American Pie as well. And we know who these characters are based on who they are not. And binary oppositions also intensify things. If we have a horror film and if it was nothing but gore and screaming and bloodshed, it would probably just make you tired. However, if we have a horror film and actually everything's completely fine for half an hour and then suddenly a character gets killed, well, that's quite shocking because then we move from one setting to another setting. And slasher films are often very good at this. The film Halloween by John Carpenter builds up this kind of suburban world, and then things slowly start to go wrong. And the ending is particularly horrible, set in the dark, set at night. And the reason why it's so horrible is we've seen these characters at school in the middle of the day and we've seen them doing normal stuff. So that's an excellent example of a binary opposition. So how do you actually discuss binary oppositions when we're talking about music videos, and how do you actually talk about binary oppositions in the exam? So here are a few examples. You might want to check these out on YouTube, or the first one's a little bit rude, so you might not. So in the video to Anaconda by Nicki Minaj, there is a binary opposition between Minaj's girlish appearance and the crude sexual lyrics of the song. So that's a great example of a binary opposition. In the video to Beauty and a Beat by Justin Bieber, there is a binary opposition between the representation of Bieber and the guest star Nicki Minaj. This emphasizes Bieber's clean-cut, nice guy image. Justin Bieber, at least early on in his career, would often have someone kind of edgy who would appear in his music video because he's not exactly particularly scary or edgy or whatever. Then finally, the binary between enslavement and empowerment is explored in the advert for the fragrance Killer Queen by Katy Perry. So this is an advert, but it's very similar to a music video. Maybe check that out. That came out like 15 years ago probably. But basically we have the idea of Katy Perry in a very highly sexualized costume. Is she powerful? Is she a slave? Who knows? So these ideas are all encoded in there. So binary oppositions, nice and straightforward. If you're not talking about them in your own textual analysis, then you're doing something wrong, because every media product that we look at includes binary oppositions. So make sure you point them out.